All the engines on the island of Sodor were very excited. There was to be a great banquet at the Scottish castle. Henry loved going to the Scottish castle because on the way he puffed past his favorite tree. The tall pine tree towered above the rest of the forest. Henry always stopped to look at it. Seeing the tall pine tree standing tall and proud made Henry very happy. Henry arrived at the Scottish castle. Sir Topham Hatt was waiting for him. "The castle's flagpole is old and about to break," he said. "Henry, I need you to collect a new flagpole from the docks in time for the banquet." "Yes, sir," puffed Henry. When Henry puffed into the docks, he couldn't see the tall flagpole anywhere. He looked around for something tall. He looked above the coal cars, but there was nothing tall there. He looked at an old ship. It had a tall mast. Then Henry looked up and saw Cranky. Cranky was very tall, but Henry didn't see the flagpole. It was on the flatbed in front of it. The diesel was huffing and puffing. It rolled onto the track. "Hello," Thomas tooted. "You must be Dennis. What's the matter?" "These troublesome trucks are too troublesome. I can't shunt them." "It's my day off," whistled Thomas, "but I'll help you." This made Dennis very happy. Dennis watched Thomas biff and bump the troublesome trucks into line. "All done," puffed Thomas. It was hard work, and he was tired. "Thank you, Thomas," oiled Dennis, and he watched Thomas chuff away. Soon, Thomas was covered in bubbles. "Shiny and bright, that's what I'll be to start my day right," he chirped cheerfully. Dennis wasn't cheerful. Dennis was lazy. He didn't want to deliver his freight cars of tiles. Then he saw Thomas. Dennis had an idea. He would ask Thomas to help him again. "Help! Help!" Dennis called weakly. So surprised he puffed right past the junction and up the wrong line away from the incline. Peter Sam still didn't believe Skarloey's story about Proteus's magic lamp. But then he heard a creaking sound, and his wheels began to wobble. Up ahead, a light flickered off and on and off. And then he saw it. It was just a fogman's lantern. It creaked and croaked as it swung outside his cabin. Peter Sam felt better. He chuffed past. Peter Sam was now even further from the incline. "The magic lamp I know isn't true. It's just an old story, and quite silly, too," he huffed quietly to himself. Then, suddenly, there was another rush of wind. Then, a creaking sound. And finally, a flickering light. On and off and on. The wind, the creaking sound, and the flickering light. Could it be Proteus's lamp, thought Peter Sam? Then he saw it. It wasn't Proteus's lamp. It was the light from a campfire at the children's campground. And it was the trees that were creaking in the wind. "I knew that all along," sighed Peter Sam. But now engine in the world on even more slowly. But then the winch's coupling broke. "Oh no!" Skarloey steamed away as fast as he could. Skarloey raced right past Thomas, who was waiting on the main line. Skarloey switched tracks, and the cars rolled right past him. But they were heading straight for Rusty. Rusty hooted loudly to the signalman, who changed the points. Soon the narrow-gauge controller, Mr. Percival, arrived. "Well done, Rusty," Mr. Percival said. You are a really brave engine. Thank you, sir, said Rusty proudly. But Skarloey wasn't happy. I want to be the bravest, huffed Skarloey. I want to show everyone that I'm the bravest engine of all. The next day, Skarloey was shunting freight cars onto the incline. How can I prove I'm the bravest? He puffed to himself. But he wished he felt as brave. Suddenly, Skarloey had an idea. If I went up the hill on the winch, he puffed, then everyone will see how brave I am. He wished he could go faster, but it was a very long train, and he had to go slowly. Because he was going so slowly, Thomas could see that the tree wasn't spooky at all. It was just a tree, he gasped, and the strange cry was just an owl. Thomas was relieved. Thomas chugged towards the abandoned mine. He could still hear the spooky banging. He looked to his left and then to his right, and he saw what was making the noise. It's just an old door, he gasped. The wind is making it crash. Finally, Thomas reached the old woods. The breeze still blew, and the branches creaked. Thomas took a big, brave puff. But without Diesel's teasing, Thomas could see the haunted forest was actually Henry's favorite forest. It's not scary at all, said Thomas. Thomas arrived at the bakery. He was tired but happy. Oh, it's the ghost engine, sir, Diesel told Sir Topham Hatt. And it's come to get me! It's not a ghost engine, boomed Sir Topham Hatt. That's Thomas. Later, Gordon pulled into Knapford Station. Oh, look, laughed Emily. Rattler Gordon's here. He's pulling the Click-Clunk Express. This made Gordon very cross indeed, especially because Diesel overheard. I hope your Click-Clunk gets better soon, oiled Diesel. See you later, Rattler. Gordon was very cross indeed. He decided it was time the other engines learned to treat him properly. So later at the water tank, he pulled up ahead of James. James was surprised. At Knapford, Percy had brought Gordon's coaches into number 1 platform. Off you go now, Percy, said Gordon. Number 1 is my platform. Little engines shouldn't hang around. You're a boastful, bossy, big blue boiler, Percy muttered to himself crossly. Later, Gordon told his friends to give a polite toot-toot whenever they saw him. But why? Asked Thomas. He was very puzzled. Loud and clear. Because, huffed Gordon grandly, I'm the strongest and the best. He steamed away. You can toot at him if you like, wheezed Emily, but I'm not going to. Gordon, he took them to the trestle bridge. It would soon be time for the concert. The band started to tune their instruments. The sound of their notes filled Rusty's funnel. He was very happy. So happy, he forgot all about getting back for the concert. I know, thought Rusty. Now I'll take the band to the lake. He wanted this trip to go on forever and ever. Rusty happily clickety-clacked towards the lake. His horn was toot-tooting to the music of the brass band. He wished all the other engines could hear him now. The ruined castle looked magical in the sunset. Rusty's tuneful train crossed the lake. Then there was trouble. Rusty shuddered to a stop. We have to get to Percival sternly. Now you're late. Rusty had made a terrible mistake. Sorry, said Mighty. They felt very silly. Finally, the passengers were on board. Mighty Mac puffed through the countryside on the way to the campground. We have to get there before dark, chuffed Mighty, so we'll have to work extra hard. Then, in the mountains, there was a fork in the track. Mighty wanted to go left. This way, he puffed. No! Go the other way, shouted Mac. But Mighty was already pulling them past the fork. Mac was cross. The next time they came to a fork in the track, Mac wanted to go the other way again. This way, he puffed. And he pulled Mighty back to the junction. And then pushed him back up the other line. Now, Mighty was cross. They puffed through the mountains, and whenever they came across a junction, Mighty would push one way, then Mac would pull the other. The vacationers were having a very bumpy ride. They spilt their drinks and their donuts went flying. But Mighty Mac pressed on. Then there was trouble. I can do it. They had arrived at a dead end. Quickly away. The vacationers took a look around.
Emily has broken down.
This isn't the campground,
Station master.
You must get all your jobs done as quickly as possible. Then you are to collect the children after school and take them to the toy shop. Thomas was sad for Emily, but excited to take the children. He puffed away quickly. There was a lot to do. Thomas was happy to be helping with the grand opening after all. He almost burst his boiler as he puffed around the island. At last, Thomas finished his jobs. He picked up Annie and Clarabelle and steamed off to collect the children. Thomas puffed through the docks. He was surprised to see Henry was still there. Then Thomas saw that Henry was trapped by a large crate. What happened, Cranky? Asked Thomas. That crate slipped off my hook, snapped Cranky crankily. Thomas was worried. Henry still had to collect the last load of toys from the factory for the toy shop. What if the toys arrive late for the grand opening, wished Thomas. The children will be very disappointed. I'll go as soon as the line's clear, puffed Henry. I know, puffed Thomas excitedly. I can collect the toys from the factory. Then I'll pick up the children. You won't be able to pull all the cars of toys as well as Addie and Clarabelle, said Henry. Don't worry, Thomas whistled. I can do it. And he puffed quickly away.
Edward
Fast! James thought it was the best slide ever. There was very... At the coaling plant, James and Edward's train had been filled with coal. Edward called to James. You must slow down and take care. I am taking care, replied James. Taking care to finish first. I'm going to pull the presents train. And James pulled out. They headed for Brendam Docks. Finish first, James puffed happily. He started to go faster, and faster, and faster. But he didn't know how very icy the tracks were. His wheels started to slip and slide. Oh my, cried James, and he applied his brakes as hard as he could. Whoa! Edward tried to brake as well, but it was too late. Bust my buffers, cried James. Oh dear, wished Edward.
This is my best idea yet, Thomas.
Sir Topham had arrived on Salt. He was very cross. James and Edward, he boomed. The tracks were icy and you were not taking care. You have caused confusion and delay. James felt
He was
bad.
puffing to the
Edward
castle.
wanted to slow down, but
This
I
is
wanted
my
to go
best
fast
move.
so that I could pull the presents
Sir
train.
Topham Hatt, his
You
wife,
won't be
and his
doing
mother
that.
looked at the fields, but they didn't smile. The fields had just been plowed into thick brown mud. Cinders and ashes, cried Thomas. We can't picnic here, said Sir Topham Hatt sternly. You'll have to have another idea. But hurry up, my mother's getting very hungry. Thomas thought very, very hard. And then he set off. Thomas pumped his pistons even harder to get to the other side of the island. He was puffing to the castle. This is my best idea yet, chuffed Thomas. At the castle station, Sir Topham Hatt spoke to the station master. Thomas, said Sir Topham Hatt, the castle is closed for redecoration and repairs. Please have another idea and be quick about it. So Thomas set off from the castle. He rocked and he rolled. He huffed and he puffed. Sir Topham Hatt, his wife, and his mother were bounced and bumped inside the carriage. Thomas went faster and faster, trying to have another idea. Sir Topham Hatt leaned out of the window. Enough, Thomas, he boomed. Stop! Thomas puffed to a halt. Patiently at the flowers. Where are you taking us? He wheezed.
I must get to the docks as soon as I can.
When Toby delivered the flower, he saw Sir Topham Hatt standing on the dockside. He was talking to the dockmaster. Sir Topham Hatt saw Toby. He wanted to speak to him, but Toby steamed off as fast as he could. Later, Toby saw Thomas again. He was pulling Annie and Clarabelle. I'm off for my repaint, chuffed Thomas happily. I can pull Annie and Clarabelle for you, said Toby. Thank you, Toby, tooted Thomas. So Toby pulled Annie and Clarabelle on Thomas's branch line. And while James was getting a shiny new coat of red paint, Toby collected coal cars from the mine for James. And while Percy was having his repaint, Toby shunted freight cars full of stone in the quarry for Percy, even though it was dusty, dirty work. At last, Toby had finished. He was very tired and very dirty. Suddenly, he saw Sir Topham Hatt waiting by the track. He battled on. Toby still didn't want to speak to Sir Topham Hatt. Quickly, he reversed into a siding.
But he battled
I didn't see that a big rock had fallen on the line. Thomas could see Edward was worried, so he agreed. He hurried off to shunt Edward's freight cars. Edward followed slowly to the docks. Edward was very worried. What if he was too weak to pull his train? He would be of no use to the railway. He wouldn't be useful at all. Edward shuddered at the thought. Must keep going, he wheezed fearfully. At the docks, Thomas had shunted Edward's freight cars into place for him. Soon, Edward was coupled up and ready to go. Go on, Edward, you can do it, called Thomas encouragingly. Edward puffed as hard as he could, but the train hardly moved at all. I'm sorry, Thomas, Edward wheezed miserably. I'm not a really useful engine anymore. Sir Topham Hatt will have to send me for scrap. Thomas was very upset. He wanted to help Edward. I'll do my other jobs first, Thomas said. Then I'll pull the train for you. Edward watched Thomas puff away. He wasn't sure if it was right to let Thomas do his job. Edward felt very worried. Thomas needed to do all his jobs as quickly as possible so that he had time to pull Edward's train.
What's wrong,
Hurry up,
Thomas?
asked James.
You don't look at all happy.
I'm going to miss the carnival unless Farmer McColl comes soon, huffed Thomas. James thought Thomas was silly to wait.
I've just come past the carnival, he said excitedly. All the children are arriving. You could rush over there and back before Farmer McColl arrives.
That's a good idea, tooted Thomas. He was sure he could steam to the carnival and back again really quickly. But as he hurried to the carnival, Thomas started to worry. What if Farmer McColl arrived at the station and I wasn't there? What if a signal held me up on the way back? Sir Topham Hatt would be very cross if I was late. I mustn't let Sir Topham Hatt down, said Thomas to himself, and he hurried back to the station. Thomas knew that this job was going to take a long time. He might miss the carnival after all. At long last, Farmer McColl arrived with the chickens, and Thomas was on his way.
You're a very brave engine,
said Ben.
Now I can finish my job.
And he puffed away. Thomas was happy to help Ben. Then he remembered that he still had to get to the beach. And he remembered Diesel's warning about the curse of the cliffs. Thomas felt very nervous as he puffed towards the headland. So nervous that he stopped. I can't go any further, Thomas tooted. And he began to reverse away from the cliffs. Then he had an idea. If Diesel was wrong about the monster in the tunnel, maybe he'll be wrong about the curse of the cliffs, he puffed. He started to go forward again.
But they were filled with coal.
I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid.
And they were very happy.
Thomas raced to the docks. Suddenly, the trucks weren't being troublesome. They rolled easily up hills. They rattled quickly down hills. And they sang all the way. Thomas raced into the docks.
We need to unload quickly, the dock manager called. But don't worry, we'll try and keep your new freight cars clean.
That's okay, puffed Thomas. My freight cars would rather be useful than clean. Just then, James puffed into the docks.
Look at your freight cars, boasted James. Filthy again, not like mine.
James tried to pull away, but his troublesome trucks didn't want to be clean anymore.
Hold back, they chuckled.
Just then, Cranky's cable snapped. He dropped a large crate of melons. Bother, huffed James. James, tooted Thomas, I think freight cars like to be useful rather than clean. And all the trucks agreed.